Great. Wouldn't want to forget to record this session. Okay, so with that, I'm going to welcome up Larry Berger. Larry Berger is one of the first Asana certified pro consultants we've had. He's an Asana forum leader, Asana technology partner, and is the creator of the versatile and popular Asana to Go app. He has helped enterprise level organizations, startups, nonprofits, and individual clients across many functional areas get the most out of Asana. He specializes in Asana usage, training, workflows, and API, and has worked with Asana since 2012. All right, with that, over to you, Larry. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Hillarie, and welcome everyone. Thanks for coming today. Let's tackle almost anything in Asana. So let's start with our goal, which is to answer the question, how can you envision your workflow or project and translate it into Asana durably and flexibly now and as it scales? So what problem are we tackling today? Well, imagine that you've been asked to do something new in Asana, a new workflow or a new project, and you're familiar with Asana. You're all set to dive in, but Asana now just looks like a blank slate to you. You don't know where to begin. You're really having trouble envisioning the end result. Or worse, after a lot of effort, it's been nothing but false starts and dead ends, and you're still off on the wrong track. I know from working with many clients and helping others in the Asana forum that this is often the biggest and the most important challenge in using Asana. But it doesn't have to be that way. We're going to go through an easy to follow recipe I've created to architect almost anything in Asana and always get you off on the right foot. You'll learn how and where to best specify your work in Asana. Asana is a very flexible tool and leaves a lot up to us to choose. That's actually a great strength and what makes Asana work so well in so many different contexts of use, so long as we can avoid the less desirable solutions and especially those that may lead to dead ends. I think you'll start to look forward to tackling new things in Asana because once you learn how, it can be empowering and actually fun to establish order where there was once disorder or even chaos. All right, well, after that pitch, you may be thinking I'm starting to sound like a cross between an infomercial and a used car salesman. Well, actually, no, as Hillarie mentioned, I'm one of the first Asana certified pro consultants, an Asana forum leader, and an Asana technology partner as the creator of Asana to Go, which is an add-on app used by thousands of Asana users. And my background is as a project and staff manager and an information architect, designer, and developer. And I mention all those because I'm fortunate to be able to combine that experience as a well-rounded Asana consultant. And I also enjoy working with nonprofit organizations, and I do a free virtual Ask Me Anything for nonprofits twice per month, and you can find those at events.asana.com. Okay, so here's the agenda that we're going to follow today. First, we're going to cover Asana's building blocks. That's the hierarchy or the data model that Asana provides. And I know you're all probably quite familiar with this already, so we'll just be highlighting key and sometimes overlooked points with the goal of creating a strong foundation for the next two sections, which are the main takeaways for you today. And that next section, recipe to architect almost anything, that's where I'll offer easy to follow steps to implement virtually any new solution, workflow, or process in Asana. And then last up is the project checklist of best practices and rules of thumb to keep in mind as you design and build new projects in Asana. And there'll be plenty of time at the end for general Q&A. So we're going to be covering a lot of ground, and it's my hope that you'll follow along today, but also that in the future, when you tackle your next new workflows in Asana, you'll review this material and proceed through the recipe step by step, or audit your next project against the project checklist. I want to mention too, I'll be at my networking table in this conference during most or all of the 30-minute break right at the end of this talk. And then again, after the closing remarks of the conference, the networking tables stay open after that too for a little bit. And finally, there's a booth for me that's running all along with an Asana to Go demo video that has a link to my site with more free resources and my contact information as well. All right, so when we build workflows in Asana, we'll always be using the available Asana data model or hierarchy. So let's start by highlighting just the key aspects of each available building block in Asana that we're going to be using. So this is Asana's basic hierarchy, and we won't be focusing on goals, which are not shown here, because those are really objectives and they're outside the scope of how to represent work, which is what we're focusing on today. And also not pictured here as portfolios. Those do relate to our topic, but their use is fairly constrained and straightforward. So instead, we're just going to focus primarily on these areas shown here, the fundamental building blocks and what we want to make sure to get right. So your organization is here at the top, and a single organization should encompass all the related work that you and your colleagues do. And even if you're a solo entrepreneur, I think you're going to find it much easier to operate within one organization rather than multiple organizations or workspaces. And in this way, you'll only have one Asana inbox and one My Tasks instance rather than multiple pairs of those. And in one organization, you can still divvy up the work using teams, even with strong privacy. And so teams are the next rung down in the hierarchy. And they should match your organization structure with a team for each department and work group that's active in Asana. And you can be conservative at the start, but at least create a team if you know you'll soon want to place multiple projects there. In addition to people-oriented teams, you may have some purpose-oriented teams like product launches, for example. And when you create a new project, you're first required to pick the team in which it will live. So it's preferable to already have that basic framework of teams in place, so you'll only need to select an already existing appropriate team straight away in the new project dialog. Projects are certainly a critical building block in Asana, and they actually come in many different shapes and sizes. For example, ongoing processes like creative requests, or maybe deadline-bound projects like an annual fundraising gala, or reference type projects, for example, keeping track of your vendors. And for now, I just want to convey that even though projects can cover a wide range of use cases, this presentation attempts to apply to all types of projects, both the recipe to architect anything in Asana section and also the project checklist section that's coming up later. So next up, sections provide your heading levels in list view and the columns that make up your board view. And then tasks, along with projects, are of course another really critical building block in Asana. And over here is a good example of a short scannable section name press release, and then a couple of clear actionable task names in the form of a verb and noun like draft press release and review draft. The last two building blocks to cover are subsections and subtasks. Most complex workflows really benefit from the use of subtasks and subsections. And over here, instead of the usual slide bullets, this time I'm using an actual screenshot from Asana of a single task's right side pane showing the Asana's clear presentation of subsections and subtasks. And these three bold headings here with the horizontal rules, those are subsections. And many people don't even know that it's possible to create those because the only way to add them is with a shortcut. And you can try that when you're adding your next subtask. The trick is just that your cursor has to be clicked somewhere in the right side pane and then do tab N, like N for new. And that'll create one of those. So not going to go through all this, but my basic recommendations for subtask are to use them only to break down tasks where that's helpful, group related tasks under a common parent task, and then simplify the main task list. But you should also know the cons of subtasks. For example, they're not supported in workload or timeline without your applying extra effort there. All right, that concludes the first and the least exciting section of the talk. Hillarie, I'm wondering, do you have any clarifying questions on the topic we just covered regarding the building blocks?
Yes. So what do you find is the least understood part of Asana's building blocks?
I would have to say subtasks and subsections, because people sometimes try using them without fully understanding them. Then they run into problems. Then they outlaw them completely and really miss out on a powerful tool. So I would have to say that. Another question?
Yep. Whoa, can't talk. Is it important for Asana users to understand this underlying hierarchy?
I can't talk either. I wouldn't say it's required that everybody understand it, but I would say in my experience with clients, it's almost always been helpful when users get to see that one simple picture that we saw of the hierarchy, because it helps them to comprehend how all the parts fit together, and also understand better the key terms in Asana, like project and task. I don't think it's easy for many users to get this mental model only from using Asana. So with that, let's jump ahead into the next section, kind of the main section, the recipe to architect almost anything in Asana, now that we've nailed down those building blocks a little bit. So we know that Asana can be put to a million different uses, but with a step-by-step repeatable recipe, we can choose the right level within the Asana hierarchy we just saw, the right anchoring point in Asana every time. And at the end of this section, you'll have a 6-step recipe for setting up your work, almost any work in Asana. And one of our goals with this recipe is going to be to achieve what I call architectural balance. And by that, I mean using the Asana hierarchy in a balanced way. So the left sidebar should not have too many teams or too many projects in any one team. The list view, tasks, subtasks, they should all be in harmony as well. So the first step in achieving architectural balance is really to follow those building block guidelines that we just saw, and then the project checklist that's coming up next. But the recipe in this section is going to guide us very clearly, but do always keep in mind these two goals of simplicity and clarity as much as possible all the way through. All right, let's dive into the recipe. And these slides are going to offer instruction here on the left side, and then an example on the right of kind of the resulting handwritten notes you might come up with after you follow the instruction on the left here. And the case study that we're going to be using is planning monthly meetup events. So we're on step 1 of the recipe, which is just establishing goals and context. So it's good to aim toward your ideal workflow. Asana's UI is so good that it can be deceptive just how powerful it is and how much you may be able to accomplish. Specify clear and comprehensive objectives, model the expected usage day to day, and plan for archival needs or aging. And to ensure the right fit, you'll need to get detailed input from stakeholders and team members, perhaps even holding workshops and sharing prototypes with them. So it's good to think big, but start small. And that means to anticipate and design for the workflow in full, but you can implement it in the smallest chunks that provide value. And that may also allow you to gain further understanding and the actual usage along the way as you implement. So our handwritten notes on the right side summarize our goal of handling all the planning tasks event by event with a focus on the current event, but keeping the history in mind, and then also fitting in with a marketing calendar that we're trying to keep track of with other things, and then an outreach board. So with that, let's move on to step 2, and that's simply to create a very basic outline. So briefly envision the amount and the complexity of your work's content. Take stock of the volume and the scope of your active content now and with a view towards scaling. And by active content, I mean incomplete tasks that are in active, non-archived projects. So don't even think about Asana for this step 2. Just create a generic outline. And so for my outline here, I just start at level 1 with the whole workflow, which in our case is just monthly meetups. And then each monthly event becomes the level 2 heading. So October 2021 event, September 2021 event. And then the to-dos for each month, those are found at level 3 in the outline. And step 3 starts with assessing the level of complexity of your outline. So in our case, ours is less complex. There really aren't that many levels. And that means we can try on for size an initial anchor point in Asana of either sections or tasks. So that scoping requirement that we had a second ago of slotting into the events calendar, that shouts out to me that it sure would be nice if we had a task representing each meeting event, because then it could be multi-homed into that events calendar nicely. So that suggests task as the anchor point for the monthly meetup recurrences, and the complexity level supports it too. So in our outline, we just add the word task in front of that outline level. And that means that the next level down in the hierarchy would have to be subtasks. So we just note that for each one of those. And in step 4, let's just sketch that approach from step 3 and see how would that impact our Asana implementation. What changes would it imply to the left sidebar, the project view, and then the task detail pane? And here's a blow up of that sketch that was on the last slide. And again, you don't need Asana yet for this step of the recipe either. I just use Google Docs, but you could also use a whiteboard for your sketch. And so to run through this, we'll start in the left sidebar here. That's this area. So we'll have one new project called Monthly Meetups. That's just one entry. And we'll place it in some existing team that we have. And then in the main pane, we're envisioning a list view as the default view for this project. And then the highlighted task here, that's the October 1 meetup event. It's appearing as a task as we agreed back in step 3 of the recipe. We did want to focus on the current meetup event. So I've added a current section for that. And then also a past section to house all the prior event history to downplay it a little bit, maybe even collapse it, but still keep it handy. And then I often include a reference section. So I threw that in too, maybe to keep track of key links, contacts, and so on. And then the right detail pane, task detail pane, we see the to-dos. So there's room here to organize them into subsections corresponding to the phases of work, like planning and promoting. And then we see the actionable tasks like choose theme and post to socials. And step 5, it just asks the question, is this balanced? Is it manageable? Is it scalable? Are all the parts of the hierarchy relatively balanced and none being too overwhelming nor too sparse? And if they are, that's great. And we can skip the next 2 steps. But if not, it's either going to be for one of 2 reasons. So let's say that the imbalance, if there is one, is because it's too overwhelming. So for example, let's say that we can see that we're going to be running out of room, or we're otherwise going to violate those subtask guidelines that we just saw earlier. Well, the solution is to left shift or kind of promote all the outline levels in the sketch that we made. So the left shift is indicated by these left pointing arrows here. So if this is the case, we'd want to take that meetup event, which is now a task, and then promote it or left shift it to be a project instead over here. And that would open up some breathing room. And correspondingly, what's currently the monthly meetups project, that would need to become a monthly meetups team. And the subsection phases like plan and the subtasks like choose theme, those would need to be promoted to top level sections and tasks over here. So that last step covered the case of an imbalance due to overwhelm, but on the flip side of the coin, now let's say that the imbalance, if there is one, is for the opposite reason. The result in Asana is too sparse. In other words, we have multiple projects, each with few tasks, so it's kind of a waste. And to illustrate this case, I'm going to switch things around in our example. So let's pretend that we instead started with a project level anchor point for each monthly event instead of it being a task level anchor point. So I've just swapped the position of the 2 diagrams from last time, and the project level anchor point is now the top one, and the task level anchor point is now at the bottom. And so in this example, we need to shift right or demote the outline levels. So you'll notice that the arrows are pointing to the right this time. And the monthly meetups team here is going to become a project. And each event recurrence project over here is going to become a task. And then each section and task becomes a subsection and a subtask. And why don't we actually go ahead and have a look at these two different projects actually in Asana, starting with the task level anchor point version. That's the first one that we outlined. So the project should look just like the first diagram that we saw, and it only requires us to create one new project called monthly meetups. That's here. And all the monthly event recurrences are in this one project. So here's October and September and August. And when we open up the task detail, we'll see those subsection phases and the subtasks. But let's go ahead and contrast this with the second diagram that we saw this time in Asana, and that's the project level anchor point. So this time we're going to add a new team called monthly meetups, and then several projects, one for each event recurrence. And then there's also a project template here that we can use to create those individual projects. So we're here in October's event, which is a whole project, and the list view shows the tasks for this event. And I'm going to go ahead and open up this post to socials, and we can see the task detail for post to socials and its subtasks, post to LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. And now we didn't see that a second ago, but there is a way to see those LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter items, even in the task level anchor point project. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to that project for a second. And now I'm going to close this up, and let's expand the event recurrence right here in the list view. And we're able to click on a subtask now because it's here in the list pane. So if I click on post to socials, those LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter items appear in the task detail pane. And these are now actually subtasks. And the use of subtasks is only recommended for complex projects, but when that's needed, they're an incredibly helpful feature to leverage in dealing with extra complexity. But keep in mind, that's about as deep as we can easily get without causing some jumping around when navigating. So even though Asana offers more levels of subtask hierarchy, I usually only recommend this much, even in complex workflows. So that's 3 levels. So there's the parent task here, the subtask here, and then the subtasks here. And one last thing, for those subtasks, only use what you can see here. So that's the subtask title, the completion check mark, the due date, and the assignee fields, because that's what's easily seen and edited without having to navigate away. Jump back to the slides. Happy to say this last step of the recipe is much simpler than those previous two. The last step is just to audit the new project or projects that you create during the recipe against the project checklist, and that's what we're going to discuss in the next section. So now that you've seen the recipe steps, maybe you could consider if you have an upcoming workflow to implement, see if that might benefit from this approach, or ask yourself if you had proceeded in this manner for a previous workflow that you did, if it might have come out any differently. And then before we head to that last section of the talk, ask Hillarie again some questions on that last section.
Perfect. What is one of the more common examples of incorrect anchoring in the Asana data model that you run into?
I think the most frequent thing that I see, in the Asana forum or with clients is just not knowing where to start to begin with, in translating what you want to do in Asana. So that's really what this whole recipe is about. But more specifically, to answer your question, sometimes I see clients gravitating toward using projects where they actually could be using tasks, just like we saw in the example. So I'd recommend that they shift right, excuse me, push down the project into a task, and then those tasks down into subsections and subtasks.
Of that. What are the pros and cons of anchoring at the task level versus project level?
So two key benefits of anchoring at the task level are that tasks can be multi-homed, and also that you may only need one project to be added when you're using task level anchoring point. If you were anchoring at the project level, you couldn't use multi-homing in the same way, though it might be helpful to remember that a project can appear in multiple portfolios, and that might be able to help. Benefits of anchoring at the project level, if it can make it easier to use workload and timeline, and it would often offer more breathing room to break down tasks if you start at that level. In general, sometimes it can be more of an art than a science, but I hope that, by using the recipe, it'll help you navigate the waters the next time you're faced with this decision. All right, there's just one more section left. My special conference dashboard here tells me that 90% of you are actually still awake. However, 5% of you are dozing off, and I think a handful of you have actually entered REM sleep during that last group of slides. If that's the case, maybe you can rouse each other a little bit in the chat session chat window for this final stretch here and keep each other awake. And that's the project checklist. So it's a set of questions and features to consider and some recommendations to help you remember to cover all the bases, possibly avoid any shortcomings, and maximize your project's utility. Now, you're about to see a bunch of different Asana features in this section, and they're here to remind you to audit for them when you use this checklist. I'm not trying to explain any of them right now. Don't worry if some of them are unfamiliar. They're all fully detailed in the Asana guide. So this checklist, you would use it for any key important projects. And we just saw in the last step of the recipe that it recommended using this checklist to apply it to any newly created projects. But you can also use the checklist for any existing projects as kind of an audit and a means to possibly improve them. A good starting point with projects in general is with the Overview tab. So let's get a look at that. It really lets you set up what you're doing in the project, how you're doing it, with whom you're doing it, and then you can roll up your milestones if you have them and goals. And also the project brief, that's the newest editor in Asana. It offers table functionality, embedded media, and a whole lot more. So incredibly valuable. And then last thing in the overview is the status feature. It's really great for comprehensive status updates. It keeps a history of your status reports, and then it also offers embedded charting in here, as you can see. And clients, large and small, that I work with really love all these features: the overview, the project brief, and the status. It allows them to consolidate a lot of key information and addresses a lot of key needs that they have. Back to the presentation, I just mentioned reporting can be done at the project level. Jump back here. In the dashboard tab here, and then you can also use advanced search down here for reporting, and then universal reporting over here for all the reporting needs. Now, Asana's template library is definitely a great place to start to get ideas, but for larger, really complex environments, more will be needed probably beyond what those templates provide. And when you're making a new project, ask yourself the question, is the project a one-off, or should you be saving it as a custom project template for future use to create new projects? And another question related to templates: can your project benefit from task level templates? So let's jump back into that project that we saw a second ago. This one really benefits from task level templates, because that's how we create our new recurrences of each monthly meeting. So I'll just create a task template there, or I'll instantiate a task template that I already created there. And then we can see it's already got all of the steps that we want to have in each incarnation of that template. Also, if we were using the project level anchoring, we might want to use a template like this. That's this is a project level template to allow us to create new projects. When you're creating a new project, it's good to think about how you're going to get tasks added into that project. So with the task template, you can pre-configure multi-homing, custom field values, subtasks, quite a bit of stuff. That can be a good way to get tasks added in addition to manually. And also a form is useful. It can enforce required fields, and that may be the easiest solution for others to use. And it's accessible to non-Asana users in your organization, and even to folks externally just with a link. Now, in structuring your new project, ask if you can leverage one of the commonly defined structures that we touched on earlier, like ongoing processes, for example, creative requests, deadline-bound projects like product launch, or maybe reference projects like vendor lists. And if you can, Asana has a lot of learning materials and also templates to help you with those. Also, you can combine these somewhat. For example, you can add reference sections to either of the other two types of projects. And let's take a look at annual fundraising gala here. It's really a blending of reference and a deadline bound project, because at the top you can see there's budget, leadership, steering committee, some kind of reference sections. But as we get down to the bottom, we've got day of event, post event. That's kind of a work back structure, more like a deadline bound project. It's important to choose the right view or views that you're going to need in your work and optimize for them. So the project's list view is probably the most powerful and flexible view, say compared to board view, if you're trying to decide among those two. But for simple contained uses, and particularly process stage workflows where you're moving a task through a workflow, board view is possibly preferred. And timeline and calendar views, those are preferable for date-focused projects. And just be sure to save the ideal defaults for each meaningful view and specify which view is the default one shown, so that when everyone arrives at the project, they're going to go right to the default view that you want and begin using that. One more point, we can pivot our view just by use of a good custom field. So let's say we want to go to a meeting regarding this fundraising gala and review tasks, but by the team responsible. And the project is not sorted that way now, but we can use this sphere of responsibility custom field for that purpose. So if we were to sort by that field and then toggle that off, we're going to see that we're going to raise up all of the governance groups tasks to the top, so we can review all those, then the budget committee and communications and so on. So it can be useful to pivot a project in that manner. Now, milestones are a very powerful feature to use because they roll up to the project overview, as we saw, and also to portfolios, but you have to remember to change a default column there. So let's get a quick look at that. We go into a portfolio. This task progress column, which is the default, actually can be changed to a milestone column. And you can see all the milestones defined in that project, and you can see whether they're completed or not, and whether they're on track or behind schedule. And task dependencies, those appear in timeline view as these lines between tasks. And they generate very helpful notifications that new dependent work can begin once the tasks that they depend on have been completed. And last point, just double check if you're using subtasks that you've used them as outlined in the prior two sections of this talk. Regarding custom fields, I think you'll benefit from your own set of commonly used custom fields, and it can be good to document them so that your organization uses them consistently. And you can use a global custom fields project like this one, which clients seem to like quite a bit, to document them. And I can show you that too. So each row names the custom field, like critical, gives a description of it, and then actually shows it to you here. And this particular one is just a check mark, or it'll default to blank. And I find that this can be more useful for some uses than like a high, medium, low priority field. And then another example is kind of emoji based, is a progress bar, a compact view giving you a visual indication of degree of complexity of perhaps a complex or long running task. And also, organization-wide custom fields are good to use instead of the project-specific ones. That'll increase consistency and then allow you to use them in advanced search as well. Asana rules provide great automation capabilities, and the third-party Flowsana app provides some unique capabilities as well and can really fill in some gaps there. It's kind of like a Zapier, but just for Asana. Remember, anytime you're creating a team in a project, properly configure the permissions, the members, the project owner, project notification settings. All those things are good to get right from the beginning. And then also actively archive projects that are not active anymore. Avoid confusion and extra clutter that way. And why are all these three topics on the same slide? Because they all start with the letter A: automation, access, and archiving. And it means that that's the last slide of this section. So that's the last section of the talk, project checklist. And maybe you can take a moment and reflect on a recent project you worked on in Asana. See if any of those 6 checklist slides might offer some potential for improvement in any of the work that you had done. So let's really quickly summarize. These were the 3 major points that we covered today. And I hope you can use the recipe and the project checklist repeatedly in your future Asana work. And before we jump into the Q&A, I just really wanted to thank Hillarie, Carla, Logan, KB, Shira, Josh, and everybody else at Asana for putting on this great event and for improving this presentation too. And thank you to all of you for coming. And remember, we can continue this dialogue at my networking table right after this for most of the 30-minute break, and then again after the closing remarks. And check my booth for that Asana to Go demo video and more resources and contact info. All right, awesome. Hillarie.
Okay, question time. Lots of great questions coming in. So first one is, what is the best way to track slippage on individual tasks within a project? Do you want me to repeat that? I know I kind of messed up. What is the best way to track slippage on individual tasks within a project?
I think definitely you want to have, assignees, and you want to have due dates probably. And you can use, well, if everyone is using their My Tasks properly, that shouldn't necessarily happen. But you can also have custom advanced search reports that you can save that can look at overdue tasks, or, tasks that are, due within the next day or 2 days. That's all those things can be configured in My Task with rules and My Tasks in the new My Task version 2, but there's other ways to handle it as well. But it also relies on people looking at their inbox, their Asana inbox too. It's kind of, it will depend on each person's use and how much oversight you need to give as well.
Excellent. Okay, Michael Blackard asks, what extra effort are you referring to in order to get subtasks tracked in the timeline?
That's a great question. Subtasks in some cases, basically, some of the features of Asana rely on a parent task or a top-level task in order for them to be used. So workload works on the top-level tasks. So you would have to essentially multi-home a subtask into a project, and then it would become a top-level task in that project. And if that's the project that you add to a portfolio in which you're using for workload, then you'd be able to track the workload of a subtask in that manner. But it's a little bit of extra effort. So that's something we could probably go into a little more in the networking table, but I hope that gives you a basic direction.
Excellent. Thanks, Larry. There are so many great use case questions too. So again, don't forget, head to Larry's networking session. And I think that will be a great opportunity for you to ask those specific use case scenarios. Amalia, I hope I'm not butchering your name, asks, can you make the subtasks auto-populate as its own task once the first task has been completed? A part 1, part 2 sort of situation.
If I understand right, I think that would have to be done with automation. That's something that you could, I don't think you can do that with Asana automation, but you could probably do that with Flowsana, I think, or custom Zapier or other.
Zapier, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, one of those.
Excellent. Okay, Yvonne asks, can you explain more about anchor points, please?
Yeah, I feel like I didn't do as good a job as I could have with that. I think the definition of anchor point that I was using, it was just kind of a concept. It's not an Asana concept officially, so that you won't find it in Asana anywhere. It's conceptual. So what I was trying to say is, if you're trying to do these monthly meetups, you've got the monthly meetup, then you've got these event or these to-dos within them, and maybe you have to-dos within those. That's a hierarchy. And I'm asking the question, where would you put that hierarchy in Asana's hierarchy, which is fixed? It's teams, projects, sections, tasks, subsections, subtasks. You have to kind of slot that somewhere, and wherever you choose to put your main thing that you're working with, like if we're calling that the monthly meetup event, like October 2021's meetup, the planning for that, if that's the thing I'm trying to anchor in Asana, the anchoring point would either be the task, as I was recommending, or it could have been the project, if as an alternate example that I was giving and sort of showing the pros and cons. And it depends. If you got a really complex hierarchy in what you're trying to put in Asana, you probably want to go higher up. You want to go to the project, not to the task. And if you've got really simple one like the one we had, you want to go lower down, like start at the task. So I hope that explained it without going on too long.
Perfect. Thanks, Larry. Okay, Beth Norris says, hi, Larry, great stuff. When you use the subtasks a lot, are you assigning these and setting due dates, or just at the task level? So are you assigning dates to the subtasks?
That is a brilliant question. And the answer is it depends. So I'll give you two examples. If you can use subtasks for many different reasons, and well, not many, 3, I think I gave in the presentation. You don't want to just use them willy-nilly, but if you're using them for, one example to use it is to break down a task into its sort of component parts. Now, if those component parts are really just for you to sort of keep track of things, I would say no. If you're the owner or you're the assignee in the parent task, you don't need to make yourself the assignee of all the subtasks. unless that you find that helpful. You don't necessarily need due dates on all those. Like, again, unless you'd find that helpful. If it's just kind of a breakdown, maybe you don't need them. But let's take another example, like from the previous question or a couple questions ago. If we were having a subtask as an important unit of work that's actually getting multi-homed and is being used in workload, I bet you that one needs an assignee and a due date. That's a different use of a subtask where the subtask is important and maybe you've got some complex work that you're trying to slot it in, work with different teams, and the subtask is actually an important piece of work that's going to appear in different places and definitely should have assignee and due date. So hope that makes some sense.
Okay, excellent. I thought it made sense. So thank you, Larry. Okay, Emily asks, is there a way to create a rule for a subtask to be completed? For example, when a status is changed, then a subtask is created.
Not in Asana itself. You can, the only thing like that you can do is you can create a comment. You can, the action, the rule can, you can have any trigger, like completing a task could be the trigger of the rule, and the action could be to add a comment. And you could add a comment and even reference somebody, and you would have to tell them in the comment, hey, please add this subtask now or something. It's kind of manual, but at least you could not let it get lost in the cracks because you've assigned it to somebody. Otherwise, you're going to have to go to a third party, I think, to do that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple questions coming in about like manually creating or a third party creating a subtask. And like Larry and I mentioned, that's Flowsana and Zapier. You can also look into. Those are two that you could use that could automate some of your processes. I've seen a couple questions come in about those. So perhaps you can chat about those in the networking sessions, and maybe there will be some people who have already used those. We use them a lot here on the community team, and they're very helpful.
And I would interject for Flowsana, the creator is very active on the Asana community forum and answers tons of API questions, and you'll get your question answered very quickly. And he's always iterating that product. So that's a good one to check out.
Yes, agreed. He is very active in our forums. Okay, next question. Michael, I'm most interested in how to better reschedule an entire project when one task falls a few weeks behind. Dragging in the timelines is okay, but messy. Manual rescheduling of all the tasks takes forever. Do you have any tips for that?
Well, you hit the main one, I think, which is in timeline. You can, lasso around a lot of tasks and shift them relatively to each other so that they don't lose their relative due dates. And you can even do that off screen, or, kind of scroll to collect a lot of things to make that change and do it all at once. And it is a little messy if you have a large timeline, but that's one way to do it. There isn't a way to do that. Otherwise in Asana, there used to be, but there isn't anymore. I think, well, there is one other way, which is in the dependencies. But it's important to read up on how those work in the Asana guide, because they will only shift other due dates if there's a conflict, if they become like they're gonna miss their dependency. It won't just automatically shift everything. It'll only shift the things that are where there's a conflict. I think I have that right. And again, Flowsana.net actually offers more functionality there, that they give you an option to do it relatively, even if there is no conflict. So that might be a possibility too. Now, last thing in Asana, if you're starting from scratch, you can, with a project template, if there's a single due date anywhere in that, like any task or the the project start date, due date, if it has any of those things, when you create a project from that template, you'll get a special dialogue that'll ask you about what date do you want to make your version of this template creation, and it'll automatically schedule it for you. But that's only for something new, not for something old. So I don't think that's going to work in your example, but it might be helpful to somebody else.
Thanks, Larry, for that. Okay, let me just catch up where I left off with questions. We got that. Okay, so Debbie, wait, we did that, I think. How do you ensure that multifaceted? Oh no, this one we haven't done. Okay, sorry about that. Debbie's question, what recommendations do you have for a project manager who is responsible for monitoring upcoming tasks across all projects as part of a multifaceted, complex project? 1, what are some tips for routinely monitoring upcoming tasks? And then 2, how do you ensure that tasks don't get lost?
Those are the $1 million questions right there. Hillarie, feel free to chime in too.
Okay.
I think I covered a couple of those, before with the, like, if, it may be kind of a dream, but if all of your teammates are really, in the flow in Asana, really using their Asana inbox, looking at their notifications, have the notifications set well, using my tasks, have rules in my tasks for, tasks that are a couple of days out or a week out or whatever they want to, however they like to work, you will have less oversight to do. And maybe if that's all true, you could just have a report that, a saved search report, that's just advanced search, and then you go ahead and save it at the end, and then it's always refreshed whenever you click on it. That's in your sidebar. You could look at that and see, all tasks that are coming due in the next week or something like that, and you can sort them in different ways. That might work. If you've got a rowdy, unruly team that aren't really towing the line, then maybe you need to establish a little bit more order. Maybe more multi-homing. I don't know if portfolios could help you, or forcing the use of status is a whole different way that you just make everybody do a status every week and each one report on their own things. I mean, those can be dragged into the status report, create charts automatically of items that are coming due and so on. So it might be useful to do it that way. Again, it really depends on the specific problem that you're experiencing and the culture and the type of workflows that people are employing. But those are some strategies.
I think those are great strategies. Also, Debbie, we do host Asana Together World Tour, where we host 4 workshops, one of which is roll out Asana to your team. That may also be helpful, because it sounds like there might be some basic level alignment that needs to happen within your team so that you're not having to monitor all these things getting lost. So I'll also send that link to all of those events that you could potentially attend.
Yeah, those are really, really well done and beneficial for even just one person or a whole team to attend. Those are so valuable. And examples of how Asana does things too. And also the Asana Academy, there are some good courses in there. And I definitely want to highlight the Asana forum. You could put a question like that and get, lots and lots of great answers from certified pros, Asana ambassadors, and other users who have been there.
Yeah, agreed. I'm going to add that forums link as well to this chat. Okay,
Great.
We're getting to time, but we have a couple more. Let me go to them. Okay, Brandy asks, we created a single task and assigned to multiple people using subtasks. Is there an easier way to assign the same task to multiple team members?
That's a very common question. And yeah, basically no, what you're doing is probably the best workaround, because a single task can only be assigned to one person, and that's an old Apple DRI, directly responsible individual. I think I may have that wrong, but it's a single person, single task for accountability. That's the model that's being followed. You can get around that with the subtasks, or not get around it, but well, yeah, you can work around it with subtasks, and that can be, that's what I usually do. There is a feature called assign duplicates, which is really handy, and people don't really know about it that well. And I find the most powerful workflow with that is combine assigned duplicates with subtasks. So if you have one task, like attend a meeting, and then you make a subtask for, well, the parent task is about the meeting details. So you only have it in one place. You don't need to repeat it. Then you make a subtask that's sort of, person A go to the meeting. And then you do assign duplicates on that subtask, which you just do by assigning, like you're going to assign it to one person, but all the way at the bottom of the list, it says assign duplicates. And then you can put a team in or just a list of people, and you can immediately splay out a single task to 20 people, like 20 people in a team, just with one click. So then you'll get 20 subtasks, all for that one parent task, like sign this document. 20 people get subtask assignments, all referencing the parent document. So check out assign duplicates in the Asana guide, and you can learn about that. It works really well, either as a parent task or as a subtask.
Okay, excellent. With that, one other quick question, Larry. You have 1 minute, so do as much as you can. This is a hard one, but we have a template for onboarding, which is a project. This means that we have almost 20 projects that are specific to the new employees. Should those be tasks instead of projects? I know
I would have. Yeah, it's hard for me, without hearing more, hard for me to answer that question. I would say follow the recipe that I just gave, and maybe that'll answer the question, or come to the networking table or put it in the Asana forum, because I don't think I can give you a solid answer that way, but it could go either way depending on what they look like.
So Kate, you heard it. Join the networking session, join the forum. You can also join our ambassador program and join our Slack channel, which allows you to, again, engage with more, attend in events, one of our Asana Together World Tours. Those are all great resources for getting more of those use cases answered. With that, I want to give a humongous thank you to Larry. Let's get a virtual round of applause for Larry. This session was so great. So much great information and ideas. And before you head out, I want to invite you all to head to the networking tables that we've referenced throughout this. And you can also check out some of our other booths. The next round of workshops will begin in 30 minutes. So I hope to see you there. And as we shared lots of resources, you will be receiving this recording with a follow-up email and some other helpful goodies in that follow-up email. So thank you all for attending, and thank you, Larry, for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much, Hillarie. Thanks everybody for coming. It was great. Appreciate you being here.
Have a great day, everyone.